Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our betting and DFS preview for this week's Hero World Challenge. Not going to have a live stream tonight as I've got a little bit of a golf outing and dinner to attend to. So here in this video, going to make sure you're ready for all of your exposure this week, whether it's on the Draftkings DFS side, a few outright bets we're going to go through here, or on the prop side of things with my Underdog and Prize Picks exposure, we're going to go through how I'm attacking that side of things. So a lot to go through, some custom modeling, a little bit of a weather report out there for this weekend. Let's go ahead and start it first off with the DFS side of things and what I'm doing in terms of my modeling. Albany, the golf course for this week, is a very well-balanced course. You've got a lot of different aspects that are coming into play. It did play pretty easy last year, over a 2 under par scoring average, but you had nearly a 3 bogey average in play. So you have 5 par 5s, a little bit of extra scoring because of that. Also 5 par 3s in play, so a unique par 72 setup that we don't see all that often, puts a little bit of extra emphasis on that par 5 scoring and does lead to a lot of birdie and bogey production. So it's a very volatile sort of golf course. You're going to have guys that are making 6, sometimes even 7 birdies and only shooting something like 1 or maybe 2 under par. So it's that style golf course. The around the green shots are extremely difficult. And though it's not a hard golf course, it's meant to be more of that resort style. The green regulation average was only about 11.5 last year. So it's a unique track. I think it really tests all 4 facets of your game. And you're going to see that with my custom modeling. So number 1 is going to be shots gained approach, which is almost always going to be the case. And I guess the thing worth noting is that you're going to have shots from pretty much every bucket shown. So there's not one massive bucket that has more emphasis than the others. It is pretty spread out here for the hero. Putting is here at number 2. So shots gained Bermuda grass would be your surface of the week. Looking at some birdie or better percentage off the tee, it's pretty balanced as well. It's about a 7,400 yard golf course. So I wouldn't call it short by any means, but it's not a bomber's fest either. So whether it's driving accuracy or some of the driving distance metrics that you can look at, I'm incorporating all of that into this week. Around the green, you can look at some Bermuda grass as well. It is Bermuda from tip to toe around Albany. And then for our comp courses, it's some of these shorter positional Bermuda grass tracks that we have around tour. That's the case with all 4 that you see there. So this is a course where you can't really have one aspect of your game and let it carry you. If you're somebody that can gain across all 4 stat categories, Scotty Scheffler's capable of doing that. You've seen guys like Xander Schauffele, a few of the other players that have had success at the Hero World Challenge be some of the more well-rounded players in the world. So I don't think that's a surprise. I don't think that's a coincidence that we've seen that with some of your top 5 finishers. I think it's the style of golf course that we have in play here. So what that means is that it's wide open when it comes to skill set for this week. We obviously want a few of those boxes to be checked off, but you're not going to find a player that really checks off every single box that we're looking for. So we're more so just trying to find bits and pieces in these players that we can really hone in on in some bright spots to hopefully lean into around Albany. So in terms of our DFS exposure, I'm going to have all of our ownership on here. Again, new live stream this week, so I'm trying to make it a little bit more all-encompassing when it comes to this preview. So we're going to talk through 3 core plays that I have for this week, a few outright bets that I've mixed in as well in all 3 cases, but then we're also going to talk about some of the ownership numbers here as well. So what I'll point out there at the very top is that Scotty Scheffler, I have at 52.1% projected ownership. Pretty much everyone else is in that 30 to 40% range. The other piece of mega chalk towards the top would be a Justin Thomas at $9,600. You can see I've got it 46.4% ownership. Outside of that, pretty much everyone's in that same range when it comes to their exposure, which is why I like somebody like a Sam Burns more than the rest. So we'll talk about Burns here in a second, but you'll see at about 35.5% ownership that he's about the average out there in that top tier range. So obviously with only 20 players to choose from this week, guys, ownership is going to look extremely wonky. The average ownership per player is going to be 30%, which is why you get a 52% Scheffler. It's why you get a 46% owned Justin Thomas, and even down low, all of these guys are like 20 to 25% owned. Now, a few super low owned guys like a Jason Day, who I've got at about 17.7%. Also, Matthew Pavon down at $6,000. I also only have him at about 16.2% on projected ownership right there, but pretty much everyone's going to be much higher owned than what you're used to seeing out there for PGA DFS. So the reason I want to point that out with Scotty, even a Justin Thomas at $9,600, is just because they look disgustingly chalky out there for this week does not mean that you have to go out there and fade them. You can still take that kind of ownership if you're willing to leave salary on the table. And I think that's really the key for this 20-player event, is when you only have 20 players and you're choosing 6, 20 choose 6 is a infinitesimally smaller number of outcomes than what you have with 156 players choose 6. I mean, just do the math, right? There's a reason why we have that kind of statistical math to go off of. 20 choose 6 this sort of week where we literally only have 20 players to choose from. And furthermore, on top of that, we have even more constraints when it comes to the salary. If you're going to do 20 choose 6 and then only take the combinations that spend within like $100 or $200 of your max salary, you're going to get an even smaller amount of outcomes that you're going to have to work with out there for this week. So the main thing to do out there in large field GPPs maybe isn't to fixate on this ownership number. The reason I point this out is even your low owned guys are like 20% owned down low. Like a Keegan Bradley, a Brian Harmon aren't getting all that much steam this week, and I've got them at 21.9% projected ownership respectively. So I think this is the kind of week where you maybe don't get as different when it comes to that ownership angle, but more so from the lineup construction. Leaving $500 to $1,000 plus on the table is going to give you a better chance of dodging all of those casuals that are playing all of their salary this week. And again, just with less choices, it's even less choices than what we have out there for the Tour Championship. When we don't have a captain position to go out there and give us a little bit more differentiation, you're going to have to force in ways to get different to the field. So I just want to start off there, kind of throw the ownership out there to the side. You're going to have it over here to refer to throughout the entire video, but that's not really my main concern when it comes to lineup construction this week. It is more so how I'm building lineups and how I'm trying to differentiate from that aspect. Let's go through a top play. So first one's going to be Sam Burns at $9,300. He's the number 2 total modern ranking play behind Scotty Scheffler, who, as you probably could have guessed, is number 1 in the field. But he's number 1 in recent form ranking. You can see gaining over 1.5 shots gained per round. He's a really good Bermuda grass putter. In fact, of the players in the field, he is number 1 when it comes to shots gained putting on Bermuda grass. You take a look at the recent form metrics. I mean, he's just been lighting it up lately, whether it's gaining a bunch on approach, about 3/4 of a stroke per round. That's probably the most encouraging sign that we have from Sam Burns, but he's also doing his thing on the greens, gaining well over a stroke per round with his putter. So the off the tee play is maybe left a little bit to be desired. He's normally one of the best off the tee players that we have in the world. In this sort of field, a routine gainer when it comes to shots gained off the tee, and there is a little bit of trouble that you have around Albany, so he's going to have to avoid that. But in his first ever start around here, he was able to muster up a T3 finish. Unfortunately, since then, 2 years ago, it was a 12th place, a 16th place there in 2023, are far from ideal out there for Sam Burns, but you're talking about a player who has shown that he's capable of going low and finishing in the top 3 at this event, and is playing arguably some of the best golf of his entire career. So in terms of the modeling, he's got that par 5 scoring that we want, birdie or better percentage. He's the number 3 player in all the PGA Tour, number 2 in this field behind a Scotty Scheffler, and Bermuda grass putting, which I mentioned was my number 2 key stat of the week. He's literally the best player in the field. So best form heading in, he's getting some ownership as I talked about before, but he's not the 46% that we have out there with the Justin Thomas, or even that 52% that we have with the Scotty Scheffler. At the end of the day, you're going to have to take some ownership with your players up top, and I think Sam Burns at about 35% is a spot that I'd be willing to get over the field on. It's the form, it's the course fit, it's the pedigree. We know he's the kind of guy that when he gets hot is usually getting into contention, which is what I'm looking for out there in large field GPPs. And also, if you're going to use Sam Burns as maybe a starting point out there in lineups, it would be a lot to go out there and fade those top 4 players, but it's already setting you up to be able to leave significant salary on the table and hopefully force in some of that differentiation in large field GPPs. So obviously fading Scotty, really any of these other 3 guys is going to be a tough thing to want to do, but the upside is that it gives you a really good opportunity to go out there and leave that salary on the table. Next up, we got Sungjae Im, who I think is the most mispriced player when it comes to DFS. At 14-1, I thought he was an okay lean out there for an outright. By the way, that's also what I took out there for Sam Burns in terms of my outright bet. I'm keeping my outright exposure a lot lighter this week than what I'm used to. I'd usually put like 1.5, maybe 1 unit out there on each of those 2 bets. My unit size for my cards usually right around like 4, maybe 5 units out there for any given week. This week, I'm cutting that in half. I only have 3 outrights that I'm going with, and I'm trying to size them down a little bit as well. So a Sungjae here at $7,800 is more so a DFS play that I really like for this week, partially because he's cheaper than your average salary player, and he's only 37.6% owned, which you may say only, right? He's the highest owned player down here in the 7K range, but when you compare him to a 35% owned Henley, even Sam Burns, right? He's a whole $1,500 more expensive. He's only just about 2% higher owned than you have there with Sam Burns. I don't really get it because Sungjae Im should be priced up there. In my opinion, Henley and Sungjae Im should have their priced flip-flopped. You're talking about the number 6 ranked player in the field in Sungjae Im, who's down here at number 9 in the pricing. So I think that if you're going to take a value option, take one of these mid-tier filler plays, that Sungjae Im is by far my favorite. And now he doesn't have the most event history around here, has played here less than you'd expect for a top tier player, but in his only start over the last 5 years, he does have a T8 finish back there 2 years ago. So I like that for Sungjae. I like the fact that his form heading in has been some of the best that he's had in his career. The last 3-4 months of this season, it's been like top 15 after top 15. He's had a few top finishes, whether it's on the PGA Tour, over there overseas, and some of the Asian events. He's been playing really solid golf for quite some time. So at 37.6% ownership, it's not like he's low owned, but ownership, you're going to have to take in a few spots. And I think if there's this player to get over the field on, it would be a Sungjae Im who is way cheaper than he probably should be. And just like a Burnsy, you know, if you're going to start with a $9,300 player, maybe Sungjae is your second man in to a lineup where you're really trying to leave that salary on the table. But even if he's your third, fourth man in a more traditional sort of lineup, he's just way cheaper than he should be. And you're getting my 6th ranked player, somebody that should be up there with the Sam Burns, Tom Kims of the world, at a way cheaper price tag. So you can see the Bermuda grass putting is very favorable for Sungjae. You can take a look at the last 12 measured rounds. You can see he's gaining across all 4 categories. As previously mentioned, this is a course where you want to be relatively well balanced, and that's exactly the kind of player that you're getting with Sungjae Im. So love that. Love the top 10 finish in his only start here, and somebody that I'm mixing into quite a few lineups. What it's worth noting is that once you get below Sungjae Im though, the highest ownership is, Cam Young at 31.4%. It really starts to go down partially because people are going to spend all of their salary, which shows you that not only will leaving salary on the table help you differentiate from the people that are spending all of their salary, but it's also going to put you on some of these cheaper players in that 6 and 7K range. So, you know, a Jason Day would be the lowest owned of the bunch in terms of your 7K players. Lowest owned 6K option would be a Pavon down here at 16.2%. But even these guys are like 24-25%. You know, it's a markedly lower ownership number, but even more importantly, if you're using guys down here, maybe even 2 or 3 of them out there in the lineup, you're going to be leaving a bunch of salary on the table. So the most popular would be a Cameron Young right there. You got Sahith Theegala, who's also probably way too cheap. I'd probably have him around $8,200-$8,500 when it comes to the price tag. So that's why he's getting a little bit more steam than some of his peers. I tend to agree with that though. I think he's way too cheap. But down here at the bottom, maybe the most mispriced play. You guys know I'm really high on Nick Dunlap. I've been talking about this kid for months at this point. Heck, before he went out there and finished the job at the Amex, right? I was singing the tune to Nick Dunlap. $6,400 down here, 24% owned. He's my number 3 ranked play in the field. Now, some of the form comes from the fall swing where, you know, you're playing against weaker fields, easier to go out there and look like an all-star when you're playing it against like the Fortinet Championship, that kind of stuff. But he's my number 3 ranked play in the field. He gains 0.39 shots gained putting per round when it comes to his Bermuda grass stats. And lately, it has been the putting that is holding him back. So getting him on Bermuda grass, something that has been very favorable for his stats in the past, could be what takes him to the next level here. And he's already been one of the best golfers in the field as my 3rd ranked play. You'll see lately he's gaining 0.82 shots gained approach per round, one of the best numbers in this field. He's gaining off the tee, he's gaining around the green. Around the green can be a little bit of a sore spot for him, but he's been a lot better over this fall swing. So what I'll show you about the approach play is that he's number 1 in the field. when it comes to shots gained approach. Number 2, Sam Burns, not a surprise that we're getting to him, but he's even outpacing Scotty Scheffler lately when it comes to that approach play. Now, if we normalized it to the fall series events, it'd probably be a little bit closer than these stats would indicate, but Nick Dunlop, who's close to the minimum price, he's only $6,400, on Monday, I thought was going to be 40% owned. I thought he'd be maybe the most popular player on the slate. Reason for that, with the form, people playing their course horses, but for whatever reason, I've seen more people talking about Straka this week, who, he finished in second here last year, but outside of that, I don't really know what people see in a Sepp Straka. I've even heard people talking about like Brian Harman, Cam Young a million times before. Like, I've fallen for that trap time and time again. Why not take the guy who's actually won twice this year, right? A couple of these guys around him, what the hell have they done in 2024? Most of them have not even won an event in their PGA Tour career, or especially with Cam Young. I guess I was picking on him a little bit too much when I went out there and said that, but Dunlop's won twice this year. He's playing better golf. He's a better course fit, and he's lower owned than some of those other players there. So he's going to be my one main conviction play down towards the bottom, hence why I've got him down here as a core play, but I got him at 40-1, boosted it up to 44-1 out there with a boost on Hard Rock Bet. Is somebody I think that could legit win this sort of event. If he's going to win against the world's best, it's when there's only 20 to play against, right? Like, I don't see him going out there and winning a major anytime soon. Maybe in a year or so, he'll be on that kind of level, but as of right now, I think if he's going to go out there and pop, it's in a weaker field event or in a smaller field event like what you have this week. Even if you have some of the world's best players, when you only have 19 other guys to go out there and beat, it's no guarantee that one of them's going to go out there and have their best stuff. So that's why I'm going to take him here. I think if you got somebody like Scotty at like 2 or 2.5-1, you're just being a little bit silly. This isn't a week to go overly heavy with your outrights, hence why I'm going about half the unit size as what I would typically do out there for any given week. But in DFS, I love myself some Nick Dunlop. I love myself some Sungjae Im. And I think Sam Burns could be a pretty decent starting point out there to some of those lineups when you leave salary on the table. And now for the prop side of things, we've got a few props on Underdog and Prize Picks that you might want to keep an eye on out there for round one. So first thing we're going to do here is we're going to take a look at the weather out there for Thursday, which is always extremely important when it comes to our props. So I'll bring up all 5-6 models that we have to work with here. And what you'll see is that some of them have a little bit of wind coming through. So you can see about like 8, maybe 9 miles an hour capped out on most of these. This one over here, ECMWF, a little bit more wind towards the very beginning of the day, but they're not even going to be out on the golf course then. So it looks relatively calm in pretty much every model that we're looking at here. Nothing that is anything out of the ordinary. So last year we had about a -2 scoring average at this course. So here are some of the averages from last year. You can see a -2.06 scoring average. I think that's probably going to be about what we see out there for the first day. This birdie average might go down ever so slightly, just as there is going to be a little bit of breeze out there compared to what we had last year. Bogey average maybe goes slightly up. So that being said, maybe the stroke average goes to like -1.8, -1.9, something like that. But I'm not expecting a massive change in any one of these 3 categories. In terms of your fairways hit and greens regulation, I guess the one thing to note is that there's only 13 fairways at this golf course, as there are 5 par 3s that you have in play. So that is, of course, a little bit different than most courses that just have 4. And then your greens regulation, no difference there. Still 18 greens that you can hit, was only 11.11 per round. So a lot lower than you'd expect for a golf course with a -2 scoring average, partially because there is that extra par 5. You're going to get some extra scoring out there, hence why there's over a 5 birdie average, but also why it's still a -2 scoring average despite them only hitting 11 greens. So it's not an easy golf course by any means. I think part of the reason we get this -2 scoring average is because we have all the world's best players, but there is quite a bit of scoring to be had out there. So with this sort of wind, which doesn't look like a massive factor out there for Thursday, it'll be, there partially. We can't completely ignore it. I think you're going to see a lot of similar averages to last year. So that being said, here's a few props over here on Prize Picks that I'm looking at. So first one we're going to take is this under on fairways hit. So they've got Substraka here at 11 fairways. First off, to remind you of the average, it was only 8.91 per round. And to go over an 11 number, that means he can either hit all 13 or 12. It means he can miss at most 1 fairway during his round, which is a very slim margin to work with. And if you take a look at some of his recent stats when it comes to driving accuracy, he has been plus or minus within 5% of the field average the last 8 events that he's played. So what that means is he's had a few events where he's actually lost accuracy to the field, and even when he's he's had quote unquote good weeks off the tee, he's just been marginally better than the field. So with that kind of average, that would put him at about like maybe a 9.5 projection, a whole 1.5 lower than this 11 fairways. Now for the season, he's been much better than what we've seen recently. So that's probably why we're getting this 11 fairway mark. But even if you use his season long numbers, I think these top tier guys should be at like 10.5 at the best. I think guys like Tom Kim, Scotty Scheffler that are a little bit lower in their driving accuracy should probably be at like 9.5 or 10 for a projection. Still over where we had the field average for last year, which was just 8.91 per round. But I think they've overdone it a bit with the only 13 fairways in play. So maybe they don't know that. Maybe they think there's still 14 in play. I've made that mistake before when I was getting new into the prop betting stuff. But this is meant to be an under, by the way. It was not an over there at 11 fairways. So sorry if that threw you guys off there a little bit before. But yeah, it'll be an under on 11 fairways hit because I think he's going to miss at least 2, which would be a push there at 11. If not, if he goes under that, like he did at points last year. I think he went 2-2 last year, went over twice, ended up going under this number twice in his second place finish. That was one of the best finishes that he had all year, right? So if he went out there, he was playing his best golf, and he still only went 2-2. You can see why I want to take the under. And then the other prop I'm taking is this under on Sam Burns strokes, who I do have some of the sportsbook lines odds up here, just to show you guys what we have on Draftkings. So if we go over the Draftkings, you'll see that his under is -130 for the under, partially because these weather forecasts have gone a little bit calmer as the week has gone on. A few days ago, they were calling for a lot more wind than what we have on these now. So he was closer to even money with these lines first dropped, but now he's -130 for the under. So I don't think it's the worst value to go out there and mix in, especially so we can get a 3x payout over here on Prize Picks. Obviously with the one fade, the one supportive stance play, you're going to get the full 3x rather than 2.75x like you would have otherwise gotten. So that's why I went out there, ended up taking those two in particular. I was also looking at this under on pars or better for Keegan Bradley. Earlier in the week, he was -140 for his over on 2.5 bogeys or worse. Now he's only -125. So the reason I took him out of the slip is because the conditions have gone a little bit easier. I was also looking at an under on Jason Day birdies. He's also a player that's below average in this sort of field. He was like number 68 in the world when it comes to his birdie or better percentage this year, which in a regular field event, that would be a little bit better than average in most cases. But because you're playing only against 20 players and it's 20 of the best players in the world, he's a well below average birdie maker when it comes to this sort of field. So if the birdie average is 5.25 per round, right, I think 5's a decent projection, maybe even a little bit high out there for Jason Day. But if the wins are a bigger factor, maybe it plays closer to like a 5 birdie average, then you'd have him at like a 4.5 average out there for a projection. So that's why I'm taking that under. A lot of push equity there at 5, but with the conditions getting a little bit easier, that is why I ended up taking that out. So that's why I went with these two. A fairway prop doesn't really depend on the wind all that much. And it's why we use Sam Burns to go out there and offset it a little bit. So on Underdog, we have pretty much the same board. They don't have as many selections though. So they have pretty much all the same guys on here for strokes, but they don't have the fairway or the green regulation props. So by the way, greens regulation average was 11.11 per round. So over here on the Prize Pick side, you may say, oh, 11.5, pretty low for these sort of players. 12.5, even low for an Aaron Rai, as he's top tier when it comes to the green and regulation category. Not so much when you have these tougher conditions. So if there was anything here I would take, it'd maybe be an over on Patrick Cantlay greens, as he is towards the top end of the PGA Tour rankings. And, for him to go out there and have, one more green than the average, I don't think it would be asking all that much. But for the sake of this video, the sake of this preview, we're going to go with these two props. Of course, guys, for all the projections, all the different prop slips that I'm taking over there for rounds 1 through 4, make sure to check out my Patreon page for all of that. You can join it in the link in the description of the video. It's $15 a month to get all the props I'm entering, both on Underdog and Prize Picks. So I haven't gone with anything on Underdog yet, partially because they just have less selection than we have over there on the other site. But for all the different slips that I'm getting to out there before tomorrow, make sure to join down there. But that's all I've got out there for the prop side of things. Best of luck with all of your slips for round 1. That is all I've got for the Hero World Challenge preview. I apologize, guys, if you guys were hoping for a live stream this week. But if you have any specific questions, feel free to go ahead and throw those down in the comments. I'll try and get back to you in between holes or something like that, or at dinner or something like that when I'm busy tonight. But I'll do my best to get back to all your questions that I can. So feel free to go ahead and throw those down down below. Also, smash the like button if you guys haven't already, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the content to come. That'll include our showdown previews heading forward. Also, all the content out there for the 2025 season. You won't want to miss any of that when it drops. So first off, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of it. And best of luck with all of your exposure this week, whether it's over there with DFS, your lineups and GBPs. Hopefully, we can try and take down a few contests together afterwards, maybe the prop betting side or even the outright betting side. Hopefully all of that treats us nicely, but I'm looking forward to it. Our last quote-unquote real event of 2024. Let's make it count. Let's go out there, get into the positive, and have ourselves a week.